Whether you want it to or not, the rhetoric is escalating. In response to the attack on Monday, what we are seeing now is trans activists actively calling for fighting, merciless beatings, taking up weapons. We are seeing these posts on social media. They don't care. They don't care about law enforcement. They don't care about social media enforcement. In response, Tucker Carlson has run a segment where he says the trans movement is targeting Christians. I don't disagree with that. And as much as we want to tell everyone to calm down and back off, you just can't. I mean, you can. Obviously, we want to tell people, please don't fight. We don't want to go this route. What I mean to say is people aren't going to listen. A trans person went into a school and church and executed 3 9-year-old children and 3 faculty members. And in response to this, the activists are planning on continuing with their Trans Day of Vengeance. And along with this, they are actively posting videos calling for people to take up weapons and fight and beat people and hurt people. Law enforcement can't do anything about this. This is what people don't understand. Civil war. Yeah, believe me, don't believe me. But I've told you guys a million times. When I used to talk about this years ago, I'd have people say the government would never allow it. The government can't do anything about it. The government exists only in the minds of its people who have confidence in it. In New York, in Manhattan Island alone, there's 2.5 million people. Imagine if 10%, just 10% of Manhattan Island decided that they were no longer going to abide by the rules. Yeah, okay, so 250,000 people doing whatever they want. You think there are enough police on Manhattan Island to deal with that? There aren't. It's not possible. I think in all of New York, including all the 5 boroughs, you have something like 40,000 cops. Now you can take every cop from every other borough and put them in Manhattan and try and stop 250,000 people. It ain't going to happen. Just won't. And you can talk about advanced technologies and weaponries. My point is just this. If the people in this country are divided between violent extremists and regular Americans who are trying to live their daily lives, it doesn't matter what the government wants to do about this growing faction of far left extremists. There's nothing they can do if their numbers grow too large. And if they're going on social media and calling for violence, then someone goes and commits an act of mass violence. And in response, they call for more. You are at that point, my friends. So you can say whatever you want about Tucker Carlson. Tucker dissects what is not being said about the shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. He basically just says, previously, in the last week, he made a video about the dangers of trans people calling to take up arms. And he said, these people are going to come and start shooting people. He was attacked for it, and then it happened. Here's what I would like to see happen. I'd like to see everybody chill out. I'd like to see the conflict simmer down, but it's not going to. You see, the problem is, in many states, they are allowing sex change surgeries for children who clearly can't consent. Many of these children grow up and then detransition, and their lives are ruined. Many of them are sterilized. So in places like Tennessee, with the help of powerful voices coming from the Daily Wire, for instance, they've been able to ban these practices. Now you either fall on the side of supporting them or opposing them. I believe children can't consent, so I think sex changes for children should be banned. Well, these individuals are saying that's genocide, and thus they are justified in committing acts of violence. Let me show you where we're at. Trans Day of Vengeance will go ahead. Now we're going to read this, and admittedly, it's a very serious subject, so it's kind of kooky to jump to an ad spot. But we have an amazing new sponsor. It's Cast Brew Coffee. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We have launched our coffee brand at castbrew.com. Click the link in the description below and pick up your Rise with Roberto Jr. breakfast blend. My personal favorite, mostly because it's called Rise with Roberto Jr., and Roberto Jr. is my rooster, and he is a superstar. He says really cool art that we made. But over at Cast Brew, we actually have 4 different choices. Appalachian Nights, a robust dark blend. It is very dark. And Rise with Roberto Jr., as well as a Colombian and French roast made available. These products are available for pre-order and will ship May 5th. So we are just now starting the production line on them. So if you order today, you will get the freshest of fresh batches of this coffee. I'm really excited for this. And of course, the coffee shop's physical location is launching soon. We're trying to ditch external sponsorships and create culture and build up our own companies. And Cast Brew was born of a desire for bold coffee and a need to build companies that support American values. One thing we can do to push back is create that parallel economy. So when things come crashing down, there will be alternatives. So castbrew.com, link in the description below. Pre-order today. Let's read the news from the Daily Mail. An activist group is due to hold a Trans Day of Vengeance demonstration outside the Supreme Court on Saturday, warning against astronomical amounts of hate from the world and following the horrifying Nashville shooting, which left 7 dead on Monday, which includes the shooter. The Trans Radical Activist Network, TRAN, will host the event in Washington, D.C. from the 31st of March until April 2nd, starting Friday and marching on the Supreme Court at 11 a.m. on Saturday. On their website, they cite gender-affirming care ban bills and the political climate as motives for the demonstration. But commentators are up in arms over the decision to go ahead with the protest, as police say they are investigating the role of Nashville shooter Audrey Hale's gender identity and sense of resentment that may have inspired the attack on the shooter's Christian former school. Republican firebrand Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday demanded her Twitter account be restored after features were limited for violating the rules. She said, "My congressional account was suspended for 7 days for exposing Antifa, who are organizing a call for violence called Trans Day of Vengeance. The day after the mass murder of children by a trans shooter, restore my account immediately." Here we go. This is where we're at after this violent extremist attack. Washington Free Beacon reports, 1 day after a transgender person murdered 6 Christians, Rep. Catherine Clark rails against politicians and preachers and right-wing extremists for their cruelty against trans people. Don't you get it? These people don't care about what just happened. I don't want anyone getting hurt. I don't want trans people getting hurt. I don't want Christians getting hurt. But they're not looking at this and saying, we're sorry this happened to you. They're looking at it and saying, maybe it's your fault. That's what they're saying. Newsweek ran a story saying they're banning drag queen story hour, but assault rifles are still legal. Is that a threat? I got to tell you, I have a hard line. I will never accept these people putting on sex shows for children. That is a hard line. You want to have a debate about pro-life versus pro-choice? We got a tough spot there. You want to talk about flat tax versus progressive tax? Oh boy, this one's going to get rough. But if you want to go out and advocate for giving children sex change surgery and putting on sex shows for them, I am going to go ahead and say you're a pedophile in all likelihood. And we will not, as a society, tolerate that. That's the line. So I never would have thought this. I thought civil war was coming because of political differences. But it seems the catalyst is increasingly becoming the left's desire to sterilize, castrate, to give children sex changes. And I mean, it's shocking. Because if you look at Europe, you can see these other countries have stopped doing this. Scandinavian countries have said this isn't working. Follow the science, man. I don't want violence. I want proper health care for anybody who needs it. But these people are lying. And I have to tell you, when you give people antidepressants and psychological, pharmacological, psychostimulants and things like that, don't be surprised when they can't think properly. It just doesn't make sense to give someone who is diagnosed with a mental illness a mind-altering drug and then take them at their word as to how we should run government. And I'm talking specifically about people who are suffering from depression and anxiety, who are diagnosed with mental illness and given a medication which has known side effects, and then saying, now that you are already mentally ill and medicated, tell us how we should run our country. I don't believe that is a functioning system that will go anywhere positive. It will just destroy itself. That's right. One day after the murder of 6 Christians, Catherine Clark is calling out Republicans. Many have already posted saying, maybe you shouldn't have banned these sex changes for kids. Of course, they don't call it, they call it gender affirming care. But it's a sex change for kids. I don't understand why they're so at odds with that language. Isn't it a sex change for kids? That's the truth. You see, they want to change the language and call it gender affirming to obfuscate what it is they're doing. Because if you go to the average person and say, would you support giving children sex change surgery? They would say no. But if you say gender affirming health care, and they're like, what does that mean? Does that mean like psychotherapy? Exactly. They are trying to lie to you. They are lying to you to manipulate you. I don't think I can play this video from Libs of TikTok. Libs of TikTok posts trans activist goes on unhinged rant calling on trans people in Tennessee to fight, quote, beat them and hurt them. She's not calling on them to, quote unquote, fight. She's calling for violence. Well, actually, I don't know the pronouns of this individual, so I don't want to be disrespectful. You know, they say misgendering a person is offensive. And so because I don't know this individual's pronouns and they appear to be male, I will just say he, him to avoid misgendering them. I don't know what else you want me to say. It. Well, I want to do that. That's dehumanizing. This individual is holding what appears to be a curtain rod with something electrical taped to it. I don't understand. It's some kind of makeshift club saying you have to go and beat people. That's what this person is saying. No, please don't. No one should. But I don't think law enforcement can handle this. It's increasingly getting worse. From the Daily Mail. Hate has consequences. Trans support group blames GOP anti-trans legislation for Tennessee school shooting, calls Audrey Hale's death a tragedy, and demands media call the shooter he, him. Welcome. This is where we are. They're not apologizing. They're blaming you. They're not saying we're sorry this person did this. They're saying it's your fault. A radical transgender activist group has claimed the Nashville school shooter was driven to murder 6 people by an avalanche of anti-trans policies and sentiment, adding, hate has consequences. The Trans Resistance Network, a fringe group whose tweets are protected except for their 3,300 followers, issued a statement on Tuesday in the wake of the shooting. John Drake, the Nashville police chief, said that Hale was transgender. Online profiles suggest Hale used the name Aiden. And this we understand. We know this. They released this statement. I've talked about it a little bit. Quote, well, it's not our policy to engage publicly with news media. We believe this moment calls for a thoughtful response from our collective. They said there were 2 tragedies, the murder of 3 9-year-olds and 3 staff members and the death of Hale. The second and more complex tragedy is that Aiden, or Audrey Hale, who felt she had no other effective way to be seen than to lash out by taking the life of others and by consequence herself. Yeah, I don't like that this person died, but it's you know, this is tough. I don't want to support these people in their extremism or their call for violence, but I do think the whole thing is a tragedy across the board. This young woman was clearly mentally ill. Going and shooting up a school proves that. Now you want to talk about any other diagnoses, it's a different question. But clearly, how did we fail these people? Now, I think just because you've been failed and your brain does not work does not excuse you for being a vile monster who goes and kills children. Because there's no justification for it at all. I can certainly talk about the tragedy of death or the tragedy of what's happening to our young people with social media algorithms, but nothing will excuse the murder of innocent children who were not alive when this person was going through whatever it is they were going through. This person decided for no reason to kill children. There's no reason for it. These kids didn't do anything to anybody. So for what reason were they killed? Well, unfortunately, for those of us who are sane and don't want fighting or violence, the activists have told us. They have posted online that these kids were future fascists. It's a horrifying mentality that these people think they had to stop children from being fascists because they're deranged. Their brains do not work. You know what? I blame YouTube. I blame Facebook. You made this happen. And they don't care, though. Me saying that to them won't change their minds. They don't care. These are the same people running these platforms that are going on social media and saying, yeah, well, you know, maybe you conservatives should not have done X, Y, or Z. What? Participate in the democratic process and pass laws that we think are important to protect the lives of children? Think about what this is, what they're saying. You get prominent speakers to come out and say, we think this should be illegal. They vote. It is made illegal. So in response, the far left terrorists start killing children. That's the point they're trying to make. They're trying to claim that by banning child sex shows and sex changes for kids, it's your fault that they went out and killed kids. Where do you think this goes? Take a look at this from the College Fix. More than 600 Washington and Lee students, faculty signed petition against Matt Walsh appearance. What has Matt Walsh done? What's he done other than make arguments? That's it. He's made arguments. They've been effective arguments. And through the democratic process that all of these people claim to support our democracy, laws were passed. But they won't accept it. They say our democracy and then call for violence? They don't care about democracy. They are lying to you and exploiting your goodwill for power and to hurt your children. It's clear. For us, the democratic process appears to be working. In many states, they are banning the exploitation of these kids. Good. And the violent psychopaths are showing their true colors. It's horrifying. But the democratic process is working. And for us, we need law enforcement to finally step up and deal with it. If you're a police officer and you see someone trying to put on a sex show for children, you arrest them. It's shocking how cowardly these cops are. It's already a crime. It's funny how a cop can pull you over in your car and assert they know the law when they don't, but just be like, look, you know what you did, I think was illegal, so get out of your vehicle. But when you have adults putting on sex shows for children, the cops are like, well, you know, I can't get involved in that. That's what we saw in Texas. Well, in Tennessee, it's now illegal. Good. We need cops in other states to just assert the law and stop these people from exploiting children. It's gone too far. You see what happens when feckless cops allow this to escalate? They could have nipped it in the bud and prevented this from happening. So Matt Walsh wants to speak. And he gets all of these people signing this. Over 600 students and faculty at Washington and Lee University have signed on a petition calling for conservative commentator Matt Walsh to be banned from speaking on March 30th. According to the W&L Spectator, multiple professors from different departments have asked students to sign the petition. The petition alleges Washington and Lee continues to approve speaker events that provide one-sided platforms for harmful ideologies and that are in direct contradiction to the school's diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments. That's the cult. The death cult, the die cult. Hosting Matt Walsh's upcoming What is a Woman event on March 30th is just one example of W&L's disregard for those with minority identities on campus. The petition reads, in his recent tweets, Walsh repeatedly and intentionally misgenders well-known trans TikTok creator Dylan Mulvaney, and he refers to trans women as men dressed in woman face on his YouTube channel. The petitioners claim they're not against Walsh's right to speech. They just want W&L officials to show they do not support his violent words. Matt Walsh's violent words. These people are actively calling for physical force to be applied against people, and it's wrong. They have, unfortunately, on Monday committed a mass tragedy. But Matt Walsh speaking, they say, is violence. Stop playing their games. It's time to stop playing their games. Matt Walsh is simply speaking words. He's not hurting anybody. Maybe your feelings, but y'all hurt my feelings. You don't see me crying about it. I mind my own business. It's not relevant. If my feelings are hurt, that's on me. If your feelings are hurt, what are you saying? You're calling for violence? You people are nuts. When are we going to get anything done about this? When is big tech going to say we will ban these individuals? Instead, all we're getting is more and more conservatives being banned for criticizing the Trans Day of Vengeance, which is coming up. I'm worried about what's going to happen this weekend. And my recommendation is if you live in that area, I would recommend taking a weekend off and going somewhere else. Well, I'll put it this way. I don't recommend anything because I don't know what to do. Don't take my word for it. Let me phrase it this way. I personally would not stick around D.C. this weekend. You know, we live just outside of D.C. We're a ways away, but we're on top of a mountain and we're fairly safe, put it that way. We have the high ground, as it were. We chose this location because we wanted to get away from cities because of the escalation of violence, because we want the right to defend ourselves, and we have it. And we're in a place where it's particularly easy to defend from extremists. But I'm not really worried about them coming out to MAGA country. We're surrounded by a bunch of right-wing nut jobs out here. And that's a term of endearment. They call themselves that. In D.C., you are going to see extremists, and it could get bad because they are no longer calling for protests. They are actively calling for violence. I can only assume that what happens in D.C. is people are going to show up with weapons, as they have been calling for. And I don't see Merrick Garland doing anything about it. Do you? So that has me worried. But I don't know. Again, what happened on Monday was terrifying. It's tragic. And in response, these people are just calling for escalation. I'm not surprised. They've been planning and calling for violence and conflict for some time. They want it. And people have been pretending like they're peaceful protesters when we've been warning. We've begged and warned you and told you these people are growing increasingly violent. Look at Georgia. Look at Kenosha. But they tried to put Kyle Rittenhouse in prison for that. I recommend just staying away from it. I personally would stay away from it. But in the end, you make your choices for yourself. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.